Kim. Okay, so hi everybody, welcome to our panel tonight. So glad you could all make it. Thanks for being here. We're excited for the workplace policies and its impacts on women panel tonight. We have a fabulous set of panelists, and I am going to let them introduce themselves in a few minutes. But first, I'm Elaine Chang, and I am a board member here at Charlottesville Women in Tech, and also the Chief Information Officer at Chantel, a telecommunications broadband company here in central Eastern US. I'll be moderating our panel tonight. And just a couple things before we get started and we introduce the panelists. First, I want to thank our Charlottesville Women in Tech sponsors in general, but in particular tonight, they've been helpful in providing us some of their talent for our panel tonight. So I want to particularly thank Jack Henry and Lumen and Willow Tree and Elder Research, who have been sponsors for us for many years. Lumen a little bit just in the last year, but I'm sure we'll be a sponsor for many years. Just say thanks for allowing their team members to join us tonight, and also for all the support they've given us through the years. I also want to mention that we have some great questions that we're going to offer the panelists to answer tonight. But to be honest, we would love to hear from you. So I'm going to invite all of you to submit your questions in the chat at any time. And I will monitor the chat, and we will pull questions from the chat as they're coming in. So please feel free to do that. We'd actually enjoy that even more than the questions that we've come up with to talk about. So please do that. You can do it at any time. And we're going to run the panel till a little bit before 6:30. So we'll make sure we get everyone out. I'm sure you all have other things that you're doing this evening, and we want to be really mindful of time. So we will do that. Okay. So before we get started in the questions, let me just have the panel introduce themselves. They'll do a way better job than I will ever do. And I think I'm going to start with Betsy. Betsy, can you introduce yourself?
Sure. Hi, everyone. So I am the Director of HR and Recruiting at Lumen. For those of you not familiar with them, we're a green energy startup located here in town. I'm very much interested in this topic just as a female in a male-dominated space. So the energy industry, especially in Charlottesville, primarily consists of white men. So couple that with being tech, and it really kind of dwindles the diversity down that much further. So I'm the only female out of 18 staff members. So we need diversity in all different aspects, not just gender. That is a big part of my job moving forward as we grow our team. And I'm also just interested in the topic as it relates to my role as an ally for others.
Thank you, Betsy. All right, I'm going to ask Natalie to introduce herself.
Hello, everyone. My name is Natalie Pope. I am actually from Jack Henry. I have been with them now for several years, and I am a product marketing specialist with them. Our goal is to really just kind of connect with our customers in the financial world. So we're mainly in fintech, male-dominant area, similar to Betsy. And so I'm just very excited to be here with you all and looking forward to mingling with everyone tonight.
Thanks, Natalie.
You're welcome.
Okay. Sarah?
Hi, yes, I'm Sarah Piedmont. I'm the Director of Human Resources and Talent Experience at Willow Tree. We are a digital product agency based out of Charlottesville. We also have offices in Columbus and Durham, North Carolina, and a presence in New York as well. And of course, I'm just interested in this topic in general as we try to get more females into the tech space and kind of focus on DEI internally within Willow Tree as well.
Thanks, Sarah. Okay, and our final panelist to introduce herself is Dara. Dara, can you introduce yourself?
Sure. My name is Dara Palmer. I am the Assistant HR Director at Southern Environmental Law Center, and I actually just started there on Monday. I'm former HR Director at Elder Research, which is a data science consulting company. So slightly imposter syndrome here tonight, since I am no longer with a technology company. But I've been in HR for over 20 years, and you know, gender dynamics have been around for a long time. So hopefully I can still add some stuff for you guys.
somehow I got muted there. Sorry about that. We don't allow any imposter syndrome here. You cannot, you are welcome and you have much to give. Please do not feel that way at all. Okay, so let's just start out with talking about, I don't know, I'm calling it the elephant in the virtual room, which is this whole pandemic experience, and how, starting with kind of how so much has changed and so many things have shifted over the last 18 months in general. And just start with maybe, are we seeing any changes in women in the workforce, either policies or otherwise, as it relates to what's been happening currently with workplace changes and the pandemic and COVID, or even remote working? So I'm going to toss it first to Betsy to see if she can kick us off.
Yeah, for sure. So, I feel like a lot of women in tech were really allowed to shift to working from home, which was helpful. But that also increased responsibility for, working burden, virtual learning, keeping up with tasks that naturally kind of fall to us, housework, all of that kind of stuff. I feel like many women weren't able to kind of keep up with the demand, especially if policies didn't change to help them do that, which I just finding, especially concerning, given that some women will leave the workforce with the intention to come back, but there's this perceived gap of work that some companies will see and not like that. So I'd like to, bring Sarah into this as well, because I haven't seen myself a ton of people having to leave in tech, but definitely the research they've done shows that. So
thanks, Betsy. Sarah, do you want to chime in?
Yeah, I think, of course, echoing what Betsy was saying, the pressures at home and working from home and all of that, how that primarily can fall on a lot of females in terms of additional work as well. Something I think we've noticed or tried to be super conscious about is, when you're operating in a Zoom environment, do we then have some sort of unintended consequences for certain team members, specifically for underrepresented groups or females who maybe aren't advocating for themselves or speaking up as much. And so we try to just be really cognizant that there's not an issue with like conversational turn taking in a meeting, right? Or are people lacking the access to mentorship that they would normally have if they were in an office environment, right? If you're not building those interpersonal relationships, do we have people who are just kind of flying under the radar and not getting that support that they would normally get within the workplace to help advance their careers? So that's something we really try to pay attention to, that I think can certainly be worse in an environment where you're, because of COVID, having to work in these virtual environments that you wouldn't normally.
I think that's a really, sorry, go ahead.
Sorry,
Betsy.
I said it would just probably be, like really hard then to have an ally as well. If you're not in the room and you're not really in the space, I can see that being a concern too.
I wonder about that a little bit. I think it's a really interesting point. And we may not know this for many, many years, but one of the things that I wonder about and, kind of pose to you guys to consider too, and maybe share with the audience is, are some of these changes to the benefit or to the detriment of women? And to the extent that we're talking about mentorships or support structures or, relationship building, will men start to maybe face the same kind of challenges when everything is in a more Zoom world and there's not really any methods of sort of creating those relationships besides, hey, I see your nice background on Zoom. I don't know. I'm kicking it out there for you guys to think about.
The one thing, the dynamic I've heard some talk about recently is the effect of a hybrid environment, because you have some people who don't have kids or don't have responsibilities at home who are able to come back to work and get some of the in-person proximity benefits of being in person, and the folks who aren't willing or able to come back if they don't have to there's an upside to that. There's a benefit there for them if it's their choice. But if it's not really their choice because somebody's got to be home to do whatever, it's a choice and it's a sacrifice. They're sacrificing something. And I have heard some approaches of, when you have a hybrid environment, making all the meetings virtual so that no one, if there's people in a room and you're missing out on the screen, there's some stuff that can happen there too, which is interesting.
Yeah. Sorry, I think that's a really good point. We had been having the conversation earlier this summer at Chantel about what is life going to look like when we come back to the office, and many of our employees were like, we don't want to come back, and so we kind of had this decision: do you go hybrid or don't you go hybrid? And we made the decision to not go hybrid, because we do feel like it's going to create this environment where people are going to feel like they have to be there. They can't be there. How do I make that choice? And I do think that's a really interesting concern, because, and as we think about policies in our environments, that hybrid policy is one that I think needs a lot of scrutiny. I think you can help with things like all meetings need to be, virtual, even if you're, in the office, to even the playing field. But if you just think about the idea that, people who can make it in might make it in with the bosses, because a lot of times the bosses are the ones that are like, I'm coming back in, for whatever reason. That was one thing that we stressed too in our organization, is that the leadership team, our CEO, our COO, our chief financial officer could not come in. We were like, listen, you guys you can't go in. You got to stay at home. You got to be virtual. You got to show up on your Zoom. You need to lead that behavior. So
was there a lot of, I would imagine a lot of people have heard, I know I have, that, our culture is tied to collaboration, and collaboration is best done in person. And how can we continue on with our fantastic culture if we are all virtual and people aren't communicating as well, and there's lots of cross wires? And I hear that as a very common refrain from especially the C-suite about, I'm not sure why that particular group feels like it's their job to do that. I mean, I understand why they think that, but it's like, it's not just you. Like you guys are not the ones that are responsible for this. It's all of us,
I'd like to
that need to happen in order for a culture to survive. It's not just that one thing.
I'd like to hear Sarah's perspective on that, because I think pre-pandemic Willow Tree was very much against working from home. So interested to see how they were able to shift, to that and not lose the culture.
Yeah. And we've always been flexible, of course, in scenarios where you need, you got to stay home with a sick kid, or you have a delivery being sent home or something like that. But we do have a really strong culture that focuses a lot on co-location and having project teams together. We actually ran twice now, once in 2020 and once recently. We've run surveys with our team to see what everybody's looking for. And about 24% of our team members wanted a fully remote option, and everybody else wanted options to be able to come to the office to collaborate. So not just, I want to work from the office today, but I want to work from the office and also have my peers there so that I can problem solve in person with them. So we're figuring out what that looks like in a post-pandemic world a little bit more. And we want to be, one of the concerns I think we have is, what does that look like when a lot of people are in a room and there might be one or two people on a screen, right? So we are, trying to see how we can do more synchronized hybrid work, where it's your team as a team is deciding when it's important to come to the office and what you want to be here for. Yeah. But outside of that, you're kind of you're working from near, and whether that means you're in the office or at home. Mm-hmm. So we're giving a lot of voice to our team members to kind of help drive what that looks like. But certainly it's been an interesting experience. Of course, productivity and everything has been just as high as when we were in the office. But I think everybody's also really missing some of that.
Yeah. Do you Go ahead.
Go ahead. No, I was just going to say, I was going to add on to Sarah's point. So we were the opposite at Jack Henry, where we have already, people working remotely prior to the pandemic. But what we discovered was with our engagement with our clients, how are we going to meet the needs remotely? It started to a little impact us internally, right? Because a lot of us were wanting to be face to face. A lot of the resources were right next to us, right, when we were speaking with our clients. So our hybrid work functionality was kind of already in place. I think now it was more so in identifying that, hey, we actually can do this from home. And we're still kind of meeting the needs internally and externally. However, are we draining each other out in the process? I think that we kind of took a step back to identify what's happening with our staff internally. There's a lot of people that are working from home. They're used to the support remotely or used to the support, in person. So how are we gathering that? How can we fill in that gap? And I think that's where we are right now, per se, where we're still trying to drive to figure out how can we meet the needs of not only our customers, but now we're looking at our staff, because as we mentioned, right, everyone's still successful. We're all still doing an amazing job, but now we're just from a remote level where it gives us that leverage to either figure out, are they really serious, right? Are they still excited about the processes that they have in place? What's going on? So I'm going back to Sarah's point that I'm with her that, the foundation of us working remotely or hybrid, I think it's a great idea. I think, again, we should just also too continue to focus on our people too.
And I guess that in all of that, I was listening to Sarah's comment about really talking to the team and hearing what they're saying. And, I hear you saying that too, Natalie. I'm just curious if in that listening, we're hearing a different need as we craft these policies between what women need versus where our male colleagues are at.
Absolutely. I would say for I would say for myself, and just I'm a part of a women's organization within my organization.
Mm-hmm.
This women's organization is not solely just for women per se. We welcome male allyship. Throughout this last year and a half, what we have discovered is our mentality has changed around how can we enhance our skill set. Because now we're figuring out, well, wait, I want to move up. This is what I was thinking about doing before. How can I do so? What are some things? Who can I talk to? Who are the people that I need? Then we started to really take a step back, like, wait a minute, there's a lot more males in these roles. So now how are we going to go forth and handle this? What are some things? And so we adopted a unique process internally, as I mentioned, a women's group. The women's group, and I believe we're going to talk about this later, so I'm excited because I figured, hey, why not slide it on in? But this women's group, we thought, what will be a great way to break those barriers down that we have within the organization? So we did a few things. We first adopted our members. We wanted to welcome for all women from all walks of life to join. And within that, we discovered that, hey, we wanted to reach out to internally, what was it? And skills was definitely an advancement. Skill set and mentorship was big. Mm-hmm. So with those two, positions, we took it upon ourselves to dig deeper and say, well, what are the factors that are stopping you from your skill sets and your mentorship opportunities? And we discovered over time that it was our relationship, our allyships, right? A lot of us, predominantly, again, we're working in a male environment. Some women just felt, I don't know if I should say this to my boss. I don't know what's what. This is uncomfortable. What do we do? And we really started to take a step back and identify more of the need from our members' sake. So we had to do a few surveys. We conducted a few surveys. We collaborated with our HR business partners to fill in those gaps and see what was, feasible for us to take this on. So as of today, it's exciting because we are receiving more feedback from women wanting to collaborate. They are excited to join the opportunity to speak in and just have that fresh breath air, right? I think I said that right, fresh breath air. I get excited sometimes.
Good enough.
Yeah, good enough, right?
We gotcha.
But we have that nice cohesiveness where we have an open space where our calls aren't recorded, our meetings aren't recorded, but we can have a nice conversation about what is it that we need. And I find that has been working so far for us. So I'm going to take a pause and also allow for the other panelists to chime in. But that's where we are for now. And I think that's exciting.
Yeah, I think that's great. I am going to get back to some of the internal networks and affiliate groups in a second, but just to kind of stay on what, listening to the different needs in this new environment between men and women. Anyone else on the panel want to comment on that? Crickets. Okay, that's okay. Did you want to say something, Betsy?
Yeah, I mean, I've kind of found, at least in our organization, it's kind of equal. Like, my CEO will be like, oh, hang on, my kid's like, we need it, like, he'll have to leave a meeting, or like, some people's children don't like to wear clothing, and you have to be like, whoa, just like diverted, or, like, oh, I have to leave, I have to go to the dentist, or I have to go take my dog, or I have to, like, whatever you need to do. I've found it's kind of equal. We have a lot of people that are like, I need a break, I'm going to go for a hike today, I'm going to be out of the office. Like, we kind of welcome and realize that people aren't going to work a 9 to 5,
Right.
They might pop on after their kids go to bed, or as long as the work is being done. You have to think outside the box a little bit about that.
Yeah, I think that's good. Those are the things that I'm hopeful end up working for women, in this new environment. But I think staying really close to it and listening and trying to pull that out, right? Like the differences between the two, and just maybe staying close to it. Okay, I'm going to shift us a bit in topic wise here. So I want to shift us a little bit to some policies. And there's a couple areas that I had pulled out that I was going to ask you guys, but we have one from the audience, so I want to make sure we talk about that. There's a question in the chat about policies related to parental support and specifically pregnancy loss. I think that's a really good point. I've never seen a policy on pregnancy loss, so I'll be interested to hear your take on it. And then just generally parenting. Like, what are you guys seeing in terms of policies that are working and not working in this space? I didn't, since we didn't plan this question, anyone can take the first shot.
I've heard of I didn't deal with it firsthand, but I heard of a situation where there was someone in the office who had multiple miscarriages, and over the course of maybe a year or so, and they allowed folks to donate PTO to her so that she could have some time off. She didn't, she was part-time and didn't accrue a lot of, she did accrue some time off, but it wasn't very much. And it wasn't actually a policy. It was more of a, special case, I guess, but just having that flexibility and being able to see a need, and somebody volunteered and said, hey, I've got some extra, I'd really like to give it to the person. And so just sort of allowing things like that are fine to do. There's some financial implications and things you need to work out on the back end, but it's doable. And I don't think a lot of companies don't want to make it a rule, but I think having an open mind to that kind of stuff that makes sense in the moment and is just a nice thing to do.
Yeah, it's nice if you can have that flexibility.
Yeah, we cover ours in our bereavement leave. Unfortunately, we'll just kind of include it in that, and then provide resources as needed with that. But that was something that we kind of unofficially did, and then we had a group of our mother's employee resource group call that out and asked me if that's something that can happen. And I was like, of course, that's how it works. And they were like, can you please specifically call that out in our policy so that we know that it's a safe space, because that's a horrible thing to have to ask for. And I was like, oh gosh, of course. And it was just a miss on my end that I hadn't already thought to be clear on that.
Yeah, that's great. I had not heard that. What else are you guys seeing in terms of policies that you think are really working for women in this space? Either parenting or pregnancy, or the specific question is, I want to make sure I get it right. What should I be asking for? Like, what are things that I should be advocating for? So it sounds like this is one. What else would we recommend?
We have kind of an unlimited PTO policy, which is like, also, it's great, but it's kind of confusing because people don't really know what that means. And so kind of outside of that, we have 12 weeks of paid leave for medical or, you know, anything else related to parental. So adoption, having a child, someone, you need to go take care of your mom in a different state. It's just kind of rolled into that so that people don't feel like, oh, you know, the boss only took 2 weeks. There's no way I can take a month off to go tend to my mother or whatever. So we try to build that in, and that, you know, the parental side of that is both parents as well. That's fathers too. If they need to take 3 months off, that's fine. So we also kind of allow them to spread it out over the year, so that if, you know, they need a month here, but then they got COVID and needed to take some extra time to recover, you know, trying to break it up a little bit and then kind of couple that with the flexible schedule. You know, it works.
Yeah.
There has to be a lot of trust within that framework, which we have in our culture.
Do you
But
find at all with the unlimited PTO that that has any implications one way or the other for women versus men?
I don't. I mean, I know that studies show that unlimited PTO actually reverse happens where people don't take enough because
Right.
there's no parameters. So we kind of set like a 3-week, you know, minimum on that. Like we recommend, you know, you take at least 3 weeks, if not more. Yeah, I guess I haven't really seen it use or benefit only one or the other.
No, just curious.
Mhm.
All right, how about other policies that you guys have or you would recommend our audience members think about advocating for if they don't have them?
I think a phased reentry is a really good idea. A lot of, I mean, some places expect you just to sort of, you know, your leave is up, so you know you're back. And I always advocate for people to do a phased approach, and over the course of however many weeks it makes sense. But you know, there's nothing to say to come back 100%. So you know, feel it out. You can't, it's impossible to know how you're going to feel, what kind of a temperament your child's going to have, like how helpful your partner is, regardless of the gender of everyone involved. Like, you know, there's all kinds of stuff that you really don't know. So yeah, I think that's a big one. And some people don't think about it. They just think, oh, this is the policy. And people always want to know, when are you back? And it's like, well, I don't really have a hard in for that one.
I
And
think
do
a big
you,
part,
sorry, go ahead. Yep, go.
I was reading an article as well that really was kind of not pushing, but suggesting, you know, changing like performance reviews, just to kind of like account for all the extra work, because as women, like we feel like we have to push harder and, you know, work to be seen and heard and get our work done and all that. So it's like, you know, mixing that up a little bit and like knowing that people are having a hard time like keeping up with that like pre-pandemic pace, I think is important as well. Not dropping quality or anything, but maybe just realizing that people are stretched.
Mhm.
From a parenting perspective too, something we did with, also Dara took the words right out of my mouth with the phased return to the office. But something we did last year when we had a lot of, especially parents with kind of the elementary school age kids, like we have an office that many people are not coming to, right? And we have wonderful focused workstations where kids can get great internet and do their schoolwork without being distracted by absolutely everything. So we had a program where parents could bring their children in, and their children would be in a desk or a conference room next to them. And as long as they were, you know, of appropriate age, they could do their online schooling there. And hopefully we're not moving back into that right now, but I know that there are still periods of time where schools are shut down or there, you know, might be other needs. And so I think just don't be afraid to be kind of creative or think outside of the box, right? There wasn't a policy for it until we wrote one. So I think sometimes we forget that there's nothing stopping us from creating new policies that make sense in the moment. Which has been exciting.
That's a good one. For both of the phased reentry ideas that you guys mentioned, are they actual policies? Or are they just, if you ask for it, we'll allow you to do it? I'm just curious.
I usually just, you have to talk to somebody who's going out on short-term disability. And so, I usually just have that conversation with them at the beginning, just so that they are thinking about it and don't feel the pressure to fill in that box on a form somewhere that says, when they're coming back. So it's not an absolute policy, although I started a new job on Monday, and I just read the handbook, and I believe that they have it's actually a little more defined about the return from leave, about it. You have to return at a certain percent, but then there's some parameters around that, and I don't remember it totally. So I think some people maybe have it defined a little bit.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, ours is a little less defined as well. I believe in the policy, we wrote a couple examples and then are like, please speak to your team. So we basically have parents write a ideal plan, and then we just adjust it as they're coming back, because it's going to be, as they were saying before, it's going to depend a lot on what's happening at the time.
Yeah. But you call it out in your policy though, like, hey, this is a thing, and you can ask for it. Yeah. Okay. Yeah. I think that's kind of where I was going. It's something that's like kind of a recognized, thing, right? Making it sort of legitimate, not giving people like right. The first person to ask for something is always like, can I ask for this? So. Okay, so I'm gonna stay on policy, but I'm gonna change it a little bit. So I know there's this sort of concept out there of like the taxes that women have in the office, and this might be kind of interesting because it is some of it's in the office, some of it, I think gets virtualized, but there's sort of this concept of office housework, and that, sort of women get dumped sometimes with that, like the office housework, like the setting up of meetings, and when you are in person, like the cleaning of meetings, stuff like that. I mean, I have this like picture of a time when I was in a meeting, and there was like 20 people in there, me and another, just 2 women in the room, and 18 men, and this was at a time where we were meeting in person, and lunches came in, and they were in the little lunch boxes, and somebody had to like take them off the tray, right? The only 2 people that got up were me and this other woman. All the men were just sitting there, like somehow they would magically get to them, right? Like, so I mean, that's a silly example, but I know there's these sort of like extra tasks that we either unbeknownst to ourselves volunteer for, or like we get handed to, most likely, right? Hey, Elaine, set up this meeting. How have you guys seen your organizations that you've worked with kind of handle that? And I think I'm starting with Sarah. Is that right?
Yeah, that's fine. Yeah, nothing irks me more than when we're trying to like schedule a meeting, like me and a male coworker trying to schedule a meeting. They're like, okay, Sarah, can you set it up? And I'm like, well, yes, but you also could, So, but I also think that that's a really hard thing for women to kind of avoid without appearing as though you're not being a team player, right? So an approach that we do try to take is to call stuff like that out in our manager training. Like, it is the responsibility of our managers to understand that these things happen, and they are unintentionally, creating issues or microaggressions or things like that. And so we kind of place that onus on everybody to be like, hey, it should not just be the females taking notes in a meeting. It shouldn't just be the females that are, doing these things. So we, of course, do some trainings and things like that, but we really do try to call that out. We also do surveys amongst our teams, anonymous surveys, and one of the questions we ask is, are administrative tasks divided fairly amongst your team? And if we're seeing teams time after time say no to that answer, we can typically assume that there is some sort of, either one person's getting stuck with that, or there's some sort of bias happening there. So we kind of know where to look further.
Yeah, that's good.
I think that's where like allyship really comes into play, because I just started a new job in February, and like it was my boss and I, another person in the room, and my boss had asked me, do you want to do the Amazon stuff? Because do you want to do that? And I was like, okay, yeah, I can do that. And the other coworker was like, I'm just gonna call it out right now. And he's like, I don't want to make her do that just because she's a female. And that surprised me because I'd never had a male in the workplace be like, that's not right,
Yeah.
So I think just having him call that out, I was like, wow, that's where it's important, to speak up.
That's awesome.
Yeah.
Anyone else want to weigh in on this topic?
I think it's a good just practice to take turns with note taking. If it's a weekly meeting and notes are being taken, then I've seen even amongst the senior leadership team that the notes, a different person does the notes every time, and the person running the meeting, the CEO or whomever that is, keeps track and tells whoever it is, it's your turn at the beginning, and it just is what it is.
Yeah, it's funny that you said that. It just reminded me that in my former company on the leadership team, we used to have to take notes of our bi-weekly leadership team meetings, and we literally had a schedule, and it was like, here's who's got it the next week, and we had to, right, for that very reason. So that's a good one. That's a good tendency, to just have that kind of everybody shares it. And it's well known, and sometimes I also make sure that meeting notes get done, sometimes they don't get done.
I was going to add for my current role, when working with other business partners, that sometimes because we are doers by nature, that they just assume that, okay, you're always going to do a task. But I have, for some, right, just discovered that if I push back, depending on what the task is, and not trying to, belittle anyone, but for example, setting up a Zoom call, right? That's a common task for some of us. And usually our executives, they will be the ones to do it. But oftentimes we'll find individuals that'll say, hey, Natalie, would you mind scheduling it? And who knows, I could be busy, but I have had the opportunity of switching the question back to say, I don't mind doing it, and I can assist you with setting up your settings. So that way you can prevent in the future, right, of constantly asking others to help you. And throughout that process, I've identified that not everyone knew how to work it, right? There's just a lot of individuals that were not tech savvy. So in me switching it back, it was like, oh, wow. So I felt like I killed two birds with one stone. I kind of made a new friend, and I got to train somebody something new. So that helps as well.
Yeah, for sure. Okay, we did get a question from the audience, so this is going to shift us a little bit too, but they were, I think, kind of reacting to some of the comments about, hey, you need your allies to call some of this stuff out. And it's not like a policy thing, it's like a behavior thing. So the question is, and anyone can take it and start with it, is how do we effectively educate others to be allies? Have you guys seen any approaches that's worked?
I would. Oh, Betsy, were you going to go in?
I can go.
Oh, I can.
Yeah,
Okay. I mean, I saw you first. It's almost like we'll play go for a second. But I would recommend to first identify what it is that we want our allyship to look like, because allyship is so broad, and I think from any perspective we can throw a lot in there. So first off, identifying what is our role of our allyship. What are the functions of our allyship that we would like to adopt that can streamline our processes amongst each other, and then take it from there to grow, right? Because it will allow for us to first take a step back to say, wow, do we really need allyship? Is it really a need for that? Or is it more of, okay, we're discovering that we really don't like each other. I'm kidding. But it opens up that door. So I'm just going to leave it there. My first step would be to identify what it is, where do we see our allyship needed? And honestly, that's something that we're working with now with our male allyship, as we're trying to enhance the process, is what is it that we want from our male allyship? How do we want them, what is it? And so far, the first step is just identifying that. And we've also created some facts, some unique resources that we have on an internal drive for our male allyship to come on and review. And not only just our male allyship, but our women allyship as well. So, but I would first identify what is it within allyship that we find is important for everyone.
Yeah, that's a great point.
I agree with that. I feel like it's important to identify it. I feel like a lot of people don't identify situations where they could be an ally. I read a book, it's amazing. It's called Subtle Acts of Exclusion. And it really just kind of reframes that whole concept of microaggressions, because people start talking about microaggressions and it just makes other people shut down. So really just like taking that negative connotation out of it, getting them, getting the conversation started, and really like just allowing them to understand what that looks like, and how they might be helpful. Even reading through the book, there was some things that I identified that I do, and I was like, oh, I didn't even think about that. Because it's not about your intent, it's about how other people perceive it. And that was like a huge thing that I took from that read. So I would definitely
That's
start there.
It's a great read if anyone has picked that up, and you will find you can catch yourself on a few things. Any other thoughts on that? Sorry.
Oh,
Yep.
no, I was just going to say too, our organization values also is a great resource to pick up, because our values are principles, right, that we all like to abide by, that we agree upon. And so that may help us to further push out what it is, along with our mission statement. So those are two additional resources that can most likely help effective as well.
Yeah.
I think just modeling behavior at the highest levels of the organization goes a long way. A lot of people in those roles don't realize that people are watching what they say and what they do. And it's just like when you have little kids. I remember somebody told me, don't ever lick a knife in front of your little kids because they're going to do it. And I was like, and then after that, I realized how many times I would like lick a knife. I like like a butter knife, but kids don't know the difference. And so it was like this one thing from having little kids that I always remember is like, don't lick knives because people are watching what you do. So it's kind of like that in the workplace. And unfortunately, I think there's a lot of folks in influential roles who just don't realize it. They just think, oh, we're just, a big happy family here and everybody knows what I mean. And, it's all about intent. And it's like, well, no, it's about impact. And it's about the fact that people are watching and they're taking cues from what you're doing and saying. And it's really important.
Yeah, I'm kind of cognizant too that, at the end of the day, for a lot of team members that I work with, like I'm the HR person, they're expecting me to say these things, right? So sometimes having other leadership or other team members or just somebody in the organization that they respect who isn't the person who's telling them what they should or shouldn't do, that can sometimes really be helpful as well to make sure that everybody's understanding like this isn't a corporate initiative that we're just like making up because we feel like we need a compliance issue, right? Like this is a thing that people are feeling within the organization that we all need to address. So I try to be cognizant of that too.
Yeah, I think that's right. Can't be just the HR team. Then it's like, it's not, yeah. It has to be everyone for sure. Okay, I'm gonna switch us a little bit again to another topic. We were discussing it a little bit earlier when Natalie was sharing a bit about her affiliate group internal to the organization. And I know Sarah's mentioned a few that you have at Willow Tree even in this conversation. And I wanted to ask, how you're in your organizations where you have affiliate groups, have you seen it making a difference? Is it something that is worth doing in organizations? And if individuals don't have them in their organizations, is it something that you would advocate for? Maybe talk a little bit about that. I'm trying to see who I have to start on that, probably Natalie. Do you want to start with that?
Absolutely, I don't mind a bit. So I do think that it's important to have because our people are the voice of the organization. So having groups, internal groups, will help us to further define our validate, right, what we have going on and what's really out there for us. From a member perspective, we have grown tremendously. We started with a small membership group of 100, and now we have approximately 300 plus. We have also opened up other groups within the organization, as far as the LGBT community, women's, veterans. We've just really expanded it out. And I think that that is a great opportunity to allow for people to have a voice. These groups require different functions. Those different functions consistently are grouped around having a voice, providing mentorship, and any type of other opportunities that suits the needs of that specific group. So for example, my women's group, we are really focused on women, and male allyship as well, since we are working predominantly with males. So we want to focus on how can we develop, educate women, provide resources. When we think of, for example, going back to our HR policies, if we have some things that we want to talk about, those are things that we kind of have, or discussions, excuse me, that we have in place that we have adopted. From our overall infrastructure, we have created subgroups, and now we're currently working on allocating those subgroups. So those subgroups could be, for example, women in tech, women in payments, right? So that, and that allows for these women to come from, and males again, to come from all walks of life and to share insight. We do have a annual Common Grounds, and the Common Grounds I love. This is a non-recorded environment. This Common Grounds is a topic that what happens is our leaders provide topics, the women, the members vote on the topics, and they just come in and they talk about these particular topics and discuss on ways that they can overcome, discuss their, experiences and their impacts. And really what that does is that unites us. At the end of the day, it unites. And, a lot of women at the end of the day too, they collaborate and they make new friends virtually. Keep in mind, a lot of moms are now at home. A lot of people don't have anyone to talk to. So yes, I really do find that this is great. So I'm going to take a pause here because I love this topic. I could be on it all night. So I'm going to definitely make sure I make room to pass the mic for others. But I definitely would say this is a great idea to have.
I'm interested to hear your thoughts about how that translates to policy changes, because, I've been in organizations before where we'll we create this group, we get all excited, we get all these great ideas, and then it gets stopped at the top and nothing really becomes of it. So, I think it's helpful, but only to the extent that top leadership is going to help you move it through. So
Absolutely.
is that the goal of your group, or is it just a supportive environment, or is it actually driven toward, let's make some changes?
Absolutely. Great question. So it is both. So we're more supportive, but we do have HR business partners involved in the group. When we discussed about the barriers to advancement, we actually collaborated with HR for that data, right? And now what we're doing is allocating, well, which barriers to advancement are we comfortable with working with, which will allow for us to then implement. So for example, women's pay is big. So how do we work on that? So the key with these groups and these supportive groups is not to think that just because we're together that we're going to change the world in 2.5 seconds. That's not going to happen. It definitely is going to take some time and a lot of collaboration. We've met with external business partners to also help support. So we have some individuals come in and help talk to us. And so we're at the point in our process where we're shaking trees. So we're making things a little uncomfortable, but it's okay because uncomfortable brings what? More positive opportunities, more identification as to where we see and what we want to see grow. So absolutely, this is not a HR driven group per se, but it is a group to allow for us to encourage HR. So we have a female HR representative and a male HR representative that attends our meetings as such. And so, I think it's welcoming. I believe it's exciting.
Thanks, Kelly. Are there other comments on affiliate groups that anyone else would like to make?
We, at my last employer, we did, they're doing a women's leadership program that's 7 months long, and there's an external facilitator. It's a really great thing. It's small cohorts, though. It's six people at a time, and you get assigned a sponsor who's somebody who is in a different function but serves as a sounding board and a sort of a person in leadership that can share their experience. And then the facilitator does one-on-one coaching, and then there's a group meeting once a month. I think that's usually 2 hours. And they do all kinds of really cool things. A lot of it is internal to the person. You know, what drives you? What's your, they do this energy assessment. They do all kinds of stuff that's really cool. And, you know, that organization doesn't have a ton of women. So the fact that the cohorts are small is kind of okay. I mean, the second one is starting now, I believe. And then I think the goal is to open that up to other underrepresented folks in the company to kind of give everyone the opportunity to kind of do some internal work to figure out what kind of a leader they want to be and how they can be successful given their experiences, their personality, how they show up to work. It's so I think there's lots of creative ways that might not be an ally group or like a employee resource group or whatever you want to call it, that you create space for different people.
Mm-hmm.
Now we do have, and that brings up a good point too, to add on to that, you know, when making the groups, you're right. So even though we're membership based, we are open for everyone throughout the organization to join. So that's exciting. So, you know, when you think of, we have virtual leader labs that we allow for anyone to sign into. We just launched a few months ago, Polish Woman Shine. That's exciting. Everyone wants to polish themselves, right? Male and females. And so we received a lot of excitement around that. And you're right, you don't necessarily have to be in these groups, but it would be nice to illustrate some type of educational and or resource opportunities for everyone to be a part of if they're willing.
Yeah, that's a good point.
Mm-hmm.
This is I'm I'm feeling terrible because this is a great conversation, but we are getting to like the 5-minute mark here. And I did get a question from the audience, so I'm going to ask it, but if I could just have one response, that would be great. So the question is, and then we'll kind of switch to the final question and round us out. So the question is about pay transparency policies and pay transparency publication, and whether or not any of you know, do you do it? And then also maybe, do you know if it's helping to reduce gender disparities by having that transparency?
We talked about it, but we agreed not to because we're such a small organization that if we say, you know, oh, the UX UI designer makes this, you know, well, there's only one of them. So then you're just telling them the salary. So I think you have to have the right culture for it. You have to have the right organization, and you need to figure out, you know, what is the end goal? Is the end goal helpful and is it useful? Because sometimes what people think like, oh, it's going to be great. Everyone's just going to know. There's going to be no like, you know, gossip reel here and everything, but it can backfire, and people, if you don't have the right processes in place, it can backfire.
So the jury's still out on it. This is a tough one. Okay, I'm gonna just kind of switch us to a final question, and if each of you could just take a quick minute to answer it. Just given the audience that we have here, what advice would you have for our audience? If you could to help them thrive and survive in the working world.
I'll go first. I would say that personally, I'm still learning kind of who I want to be when I grow up, and while I've always done HR, I have found a lot of it's very rewarding to kind of switch industries and to kind of gain new experiences and a new kind of flavor of HR, that basic HR work. And lately, this past year and a half has been very stressful in my career based on, rescinded offers, moving across the country, maybe not making the right choice and realizing it. I think what I would say to people is, don't be afraid if you're not aligned with your organization, whether it's their values or something's missing, it's okay. Like, it's okay to leave. It's okay to change your mind. It's okay to decide that that's not the right thing for you, and don't get trapped somewhere because you're afraid what's going to be in your resume, or I think we have to recognize that working somewhere has to be a symbiotic relationship, and you have to be getting something out of it too. So that's my
Yeah, that's great. I think that's terrific advice, and hard to do, but really good advice. How about Sarah?
Yeah, kind of similar, actually. I would say, be honest about what's important to you in terms of your career, whether maybe it's compensation and leaving work at work, or maybe it's respect or flexibility within the workplace or something like that. And then, be honest with your leadership or management about what that factor is. And if you can't be, honest about what's important to you in your career, maybe reflect on that as well, whether that's the right spot. I know it's not easy to change organizations, but I do think identifying what that important factor for you is, it goes a long way in just helping to create satisfaction and make sure you're in the right space for yourself.
Yeah, great. How about Natalie?
I'm just going to end it with self-love. Love yourself. I think that's important, because you identifying for yourself and not just for others will really help you drive to which direction is best for you.
Thank you, Natalie. Okay, Betsy, round us out.
Yeah, I kind of have the same. I said, like, be your own voice. Don't be afraid to speak up when you feel like it's necessary. But also on the other side, like, don't be afraid to show vulnerability, because people are watching us and they can see, like, oh, if she can say that or speak up for that, I can too. So, really just, saying what you need and sticking by your values.
Yeah, like I love all this advice, because I think it does point in the same direction, right? To just speak up and to speak from a place of what you need, and to just know that I think people are listening, and sometimes we're more afraid to speak than the people listening want to hear from us. So okay, well, that took us to 6:31. Honestly, we could have had a lot more discussion. I want to thank Sarah and Dara and Natalie and Betsy so much for being such amazing panelists. Thank you guys for sharing your own vulnerabilities and your information. Thank you so much for being here tonight and taking the time. I hope the audience enjoyed it. I actually wrote down many things that I was like, oh, I'm going to go check into this. So it was super helpful. You guys are terrific. Thank you so much. And for all of the members of the audience, thanks for sticking with us, and for some of you experiencing your first Zoom bomb. So much to share at dinner tonight. All right. Well, thanks everyone. Have a great evening. We'll see you guys. I will see everyone. Sorry. Again at another event. So thank you so much.
Thank you.
Bye, Elaine.
Bye.
Bye.